Hi, and welcome to my presentation for HomaJam 2021. My presentation is called The Future of Game Development, Rapid Prototyping, and Audience Exploration. My name is Eric Seufert. I'm really happy to be here. I thank the Homa team for inviting me, and I hope you enjoy this presentation. A bit about me before we begin. I run the website Mobile Dev Memo. I also run, Mobile Dev Memo is a trade blog and a Slack channel dedicated to mobile advertising strategy and freemium product design. I also run a website called QuantMar, which is sort of a stack exchange for performance marketers. And I built the Theseus Python library, which is a tool for cohort analysis and projection. Prior to doing that, those kind of various things that I do now, I had worked at a number of companies. I worked at Skype. I worked at Angry Birds at Rovio, which is the developer behind Angry Birds. I was the VP of user acquisition there. I built a company called Agamemnon, which I sold to a mobile gaming company called Network back in 2017. And I also wrote a book called Freemium Economics, which was published in 2014 and is available on Amazon. So just some kind of information about the structure of this presentation. I'll start with some background on why is rapid prototyping the future of game development? What is changing? What is changing to make rapid prototyping the future of game development? And then I'll move into what I call the power triad of resonance. The power triad of resonance, which is a concept that I came up with a few years ago that I think helps to inform decisions, design decisions, and art style decisions, and mechanic pairings with different themes and tones. It helps to inform those decisions when thinking about what kind of audience you're trying to attack with developing a game and publishing a game. And then finally, we'll talk about rapid prototyping. What is it? How do you do it? How do you work that into the development process? And how do you get from a very early MVP to a green light ready game that you ultimately will launch globally? So kind of a little bit of context before I get into the presentation. What is this presentation? Well, this presentation is a conceptual framework for approaching market penetration, right? A conceptual framework for entering the market and trying to succeed with a game, right? For building a game that you think will ultimately perform well in the market based on market conditions, based on audience segments and audience sizes. It is also a high-level strategy for growing a business, right? What this presentation is not. It is not a number of tips and tricks for building your game. It is also not it doesn't include any get rich quick advice. So if your goal in listening to this presentation was to get like sort of super tactical, very specific guidance on one particular thing that you should do to change the trajectory of your game, unfortunately, this presentation doesn't have that. If you're looking for like that one simple trick, that one simple setting to tune in your game to double your revenue or whatever, this presentation does not have that. This presentation is pretty high level and strategic. Okay, so some background. So why do we care about this? Well, digital ad platforms are facing regulatory and platform headwinds and will not be able to target ads as effectively as they previously have. So what I'm talking about there is, if you kind of follow the sort of mobile advertising space, or you just generally follow Apple and Google, you probably know that the IDFA is being deprecated by Apple, and that is a whole bunch of different knock-on effects on ad platforms. And the ultimate impact of that is that game developers won't be able to sort of release these very niche games that then get sort of targeted to the relevant audience by Facebook, right? That's not going to be able to happen anymore. Facebook won't be able to go and find you these whales, right? Like a lot of games were built for very niche audiences, but those audiences were known to monetize very well. And what they could depend on was that Facebook would go and find them the whales. Well, that's probably not going to be as effective anymore. Facebook probably won't be as effective at being able to do that anymore. And so for this reason, developers will not be able to rely on platforms for building audience associations going forward. Developers must do their own audience exploration and deliver that game to that audience. Versus what kind of has been done till now, or at least in the sort of like 2016, 2017 till now epoch, which was developers developed the game, right? They developed a game that they wanted to make. And then they simply handed it over to these ad platforms, and the ad platforms did all that matching. The ad platforms found the audiences, and they advertised it to the right audiences, and the developer didn't really have to do anything. They just built the game and delivered it to the ad platform. So rapid prototyping is a means of exploring the total addressable market, right? TAM, total addressable market, and most relevant audience for a title before fully investing into development, right? So the tail wags the dog, right? This is kind of taking the opposite approach that most people normally take when they build a product. So you use advertising creative and early prototypes to find the audience that is best activated by game, theme / mechanic combination, right? Once you have found the audience, then you go build the game. So we want to go find the audience that we can attack or that we can sort of reach effectively, efficiently with a specific combination of all the factors that make up a game. And once we find that audience, and once we find that combination of things that can efficiently reach that audience, or that we can efficiently reach that audience with, then we go build that game, right? What we don't do is we don't say, hey, I'd like to build this game, build the game, and then just sort of hope that there's a big audience for it that can be reached easily as a result of the way that game looks or the way that game plays. What we want to do is we want to find the right audience and then build something that they'll like, right? Rather than building something that we like and hoping a bunch of other people like that as well. So I think assessing the gaming landscape involves evaluating game mechanics first, right? The game mechanic is the sort of like I think of it as the core loop. What is the sort of main thing that a player does in your game? What is the sort of main challenge or the main problem that the game poses to the player, and how do they solve that problem, right? So if you kind of just map out the different mechanics of mobile games, and then you look at like the kind of unit monetization versus the marginal unit acquisition costs, and then the general size of those markets, right? The size of the circle here corresponds to the size of the market for that given mechanic. You see that like hyper casuals at the bottom left, right? As low unit acquisition costs, but like low unit monetization. Social casino being at the top right, which is kind of, it's a small circle. It's not that big of a market for that type of game, but it has high unit monetization, high marginal unit acquisition costs. And when I say marginal unit acquisition costs, I mean like at scale, right? When this game is scaled, what is the cost of one additional player, right? And so I think if you think about these mechanics, right, the underlying mechanics, and how they sort of correspond to different sort of like unit monetization levels and different marginal unit acquisition costs, and then the general size of the markets, it helps you think about like, well, what is the total addressable market for any game within that segment, right? Within that mechanic segment. Now, I guess most of the people watching this are going to be coming from hyper casual development backgrounds, right? Maybe hybrid casual or pure casual, but I'm guessing there probably aren't a whole lot of social casino developers in this audience, and I've kind of tuned the presentation on that basis, right? So now that we've kind of thought about the different segments of the market, like we could think about the different components of a growth strategy, right? If you're trying to grow a game, you're trying to grow a game's audience, what are the different tools that you have available? Well, I think there's basically three, right? There's direct response user acquisition, there's cross promo, and there's brand reach. You could also call that just like general organic reach, right? So the idea being that there's some kind of organic pull. Right now, maybe the brand is an actual IP, or maybe the brand is just, the sort of recognition that you've created through growing the title to a large audience, and people start talking about it, and they start telling their friends about it, and then you get that sort of magnetism that way, right? So direct response user acquisition, that's the kind of titles that pursue that are the ones that monetize primarily through IAPs, and the ones that spend the most money potentially are the ones that have the sort of like highest highest, or the sort of like most robust in-game economies based on IAPs, right? So you've got some, Vegas slots in there. So social casino, you've got some kind of puzzle, you've got some build and battle. Cross promotion, a lot of the bigger hyper casual studios utilize cross promotion pretty heavily to promote new games and to drive new games up the charts, and to increase the kind of surface area of that discovery that then drives a lot of organic reach. And then brand reach. So brand reach or organic reach, just having built a brand or having built some sort of awareness of the game through just the sort of sheer size of the game, that then creates a kind of magnetic pull that creates a sort of center of gravity for that game that pulls a lot of people in without having to reach them with direct response ads or cross promotion, right? And then you get these kind of hybrid approaches, right? So you got direct response user acquisition paired with brand reach. So that basically is, you've got like a kind of more IAP driven economy paired with a really popular IP, and maybe that helps you sort of offset some of that direct response user acquisition cost, or you combine all three, right? So you get some cross promo across a portfolio combined with brand reach, and in this case, you've got these kind of homegrown brands with Angry Birds and Candy Crush, Soda Saga, and then you've got also direct response user acquisition layered on top of that. So these aren't mutually exclusive. You can combine these, right, to great effect. Okay, so that background having been covered, we can kind of move into this idea that I call the power triad of resonance, which sounds very cryptic, right? What does that mean? It sounds almost like a secret society, but I think it makes a lot of intuitive sense, right? Now, I wrote this article many years ago. I think wrote this in like 2015 or something. And the basic idea of it, and the URL is down there at the bottom, but the basic idea of it is that for a game to be successful, and successful meaning it can be scaled systematically, right? So you release a game and it just blows up organically. That's great, and that's an awesome outcome for everybody, but that's not really a systematic growth, right? That's not really systematic. That's not like planned, sort of scientific, dependable growth. That's almost like a runaway horse, right? And you're just trying to hang on. I think what a lot of companies, especially bigger companies that run big portfolios, what they want to do is they want to achieve systematic growth. They want to achieve sort of like dependable growth that they can plan, right? And the way you do that, right, is paid ads or cross promotion. It's something that you actually control, where there's an input and there's an output. It's not just I launch the game and it blows up organically and I make a lot of money. It's actually that, hey, I pushed the game out and there's some kind of economic model that says if I put $1 into promoting it, I'll get $1.X back, right? 1.X dollars back. And in that way, I can sort of control the growth, and I'm in charge, right? I'm actually directing the growth. I'm not just sort of like the recipient of the growth, right? And my idea here was that for any successful game to sort of grow in that systematic controlled way, there are three aspects to it that need to align, right? There's the game tone, there's the game mechanic, and there's the game theme, and they all need to align into what I call demographic fit, right? So that means all three of these things make sense together in combination. They make sense together for a particular audience, right? And so, okay, what do I mean by these things? Well, game mechanic, again, that's just the kind of underlying gameplay, right? Like that's match 3, or that's build and battle, or that's social casino, or that's racing. That's just the sort of like the whatever consumes the player's attention in the core loop, right? Not the meta game, but the core loop, the actual thing that they come into the game and that occupies their attention primarily in those moments of play, right? Not the sort of planning stuff that takes place after in the sort of meta game context. So that's the game mechanic, and the game theme is just almost like I call it the skin of the game. Like where does the game take place? Where's the narrative setting of the game, right? So a game theme might be like medieval, it might be space, it might be pirates. It might be New York mob. It's the setting of the game, where it takes place, the types of characters that are in it, and then the game tone is basically just the art style, right? Is it hyper realistic, photorealistic? Is it cartoony? Is it upbeat cartoony? Is it dark and brooding? Right now, you can imagine like a space game where it's dark and brooding, which the game tone is dark and brooding, versus it's cartoony and upbeat, right? You can picture those. Those two very distinct ideas, right? And all three of these things need to kind of come together and combine in a way that is appealing to the audience in order for this to be successful. In order for this to be successfully promoted to that specific audience, all three of these things need to be in alignment, right? So kind of that's a little bit of a background on this idea of the power triad of resonance. How do we align the game tone and the theme with the mechanic? Well, I think we start by asking ourselves a few questions. Does the mix of this theme with that mechanic produce a game that is cheap / easy to distribute with UA, right? That reaches an audience in a way that's resonant, in a way that's appealing, in a way that doesn't have much friction, right? In terms of people wanting to click on the ads. In a way, does it produce a game that is tonally consistent, right? So does the mechanic make sense with the setting, right? Like tank warfare in the medieval setting, obviously it doesn't make sense. But also like, this like sort of upbeat kind of comical game tone is not going to make sense with like a hardcore PvP war game usually, right? So these things all just kind of have to sort of sit together in a way that naturally is like organically makes sense. And does this game activate an existing audience in a way that makes them eager to spend money, right? So is there an existing audience for this type of game? And does it make them excited to play, right? And so I say spend money. If you're coming from the hyper casual perspective, you probably don't care that much about spending money. You probably care more just about engaging a lot, right? And so you could kind of replace those words with engaged a lot. Like, does this activate an existing audience, an audience that is known to exist for a certain type of game, and does it activate them in a way that makes them eager to engage a lot? Right. And we can take some examples of this, or we can look at some kind of what we think are probably counter examples, or sort of like negative scenarios, right? So we've got Kim Kardashian, the game. It works, right? Because it's like the simulation game, and it's sort of like this upbeat, cartoony tone, and the theme is just like, making your way in Hollywood or whatever. But what if we just put Kim Kardashian as like the main character in a 4X battle game? Well, it's probably not going to work as well. Like, it's not tonally consistent. Like, why is Kim Kardashian there? Why is Kim Kardashian fighting? It just doesn't make sense. Why is it setting? Why is, it's none of this makes sense when it's put together. It's just a bad fit. It's not tonally consistent, right? So these things just need to sort of align in a way that makes sense and that also appeals to the audience. Like the Kim Kardashian audience is not the people that would like to play, the people that would like to click an ad for a Kim Kardashian game probably don't play 4X battle games. That's just an assumption on my part. We could vet that assumption, but my guess is that that's probably not the right audience, right? You're not getting any benefit, right, from that brand association or that theme and that tone with that game mechanic. So how do we vet a game before launch, right? So we answer a couple questions. And when I say vet a game before launch, I mean that the whole sort of like development and soft launch process. So who wants to play this game? Do many of those people exist? Can those people be reached with ads? And so, if we start with these questions, we can, if we say, no, or who wants to play this game? I don't know. Do many of those people exist? I'm not sure. Can those people be reached with ads? I don't know. Well, you're not really going into development with your eyes wide open, with sort of like a portfolio of data ready to support the development of this game, right? And so if you think about the development cycle and the sort of like risk / sunk development costs, well, they're the lowest earlier, and then they get higher later, right? Just sort of, that makes intuitive sense, right? Well, given that, we want to sort of answer these questions and vet this game as soon as we can, right? We don't want to progress deep into the development cycle before we figure out that this game just doesn't work. There's no audience for this game, or the audience that exists that we think we're pursuing doesn't like this type of mechanic, or we can't reach them and make them click ads with this type of tone, or this type of, in this setting, or this type of theme, right? And so answering these questions as early as possible just reduces the sort of risk, the sunk development costs, and also like the opportunity costs that you could go and do something else. And so what does an opportunity look like? Like, if we're just thinking about, well, okay, well, we know what questions we should ask ourselves that should kind of stop us from developing something, but like, what should we be pursuing? What's an opportunity? So I like to think about, if we think about like just the top charts, what types of games exist across this sort of spectrum of the top downloaded chart, right? Well, at the top, we've just got like a game, and this is meant to be the top downloaded chart. It says grossing on the left. That's a mistake. It should be the top 100 downloaded chart. So that top layer, the top 20, and so on the right, you see the sort of rankings, right? So the 100 and below is, ranks 100 and below, and then between 150 is that red segment, and then between 50 and 20 is that green segment, and then 20 to 1 is the blue segment. So the top 1 to 20 downloaded games. Well, the top 1 to 20 downloaded games, a massive developer with a huge balance sheet, right? They have they do massive UA, or UA on a massive scale, and or have extreme virality. Then, the next layer down is just a large developer, usually operating a big portfolio. They have, a downloaded game between 20 and 50. And they run sophisticated UA and or significant or have significant virality. And then the next layer is between 50 and 100 downloaded is the developer successfully scaling a viable game, right? So this got viable unit economics, and they're scaling it through systematic UA and or general recognition. And then 100 and lower, it's just a small developer with a great game. Like, right, if we're able to hit 100 downloaded, that's pretty good, and it's because we got a good game. But maybe we don't have all the infrastructure that a big developer has to run UA. We don't have the analytics. We don't have the marketing team. And so, the idea being that like developer state over time should be kind of moving along this this sort of like vertical scale. Hopefully that small developer with a great game grows into a developer successfully scaling a viable game, then grows into the large developer with a big portfolio, and then moves into becoming a massive developer with a huge balance sheet. Now, some games obviously hit it out of the park and get top one downloaded, and they're not massive developers with a huge balance sheet, but they're benefiting from virality, right? The idea here though is like, if you want to systematically do this, if you want to do this as a result of a forecast and a plan, and having built infrastructure to support that, then yeah, this is like the sort of the evolution, right, from bottom to top. And so what is that evolution? How do you do that? When we go back to that framework that was like the mass appeal, niche appeal, male, female, how do you do that? How do you engineer that evolution, right? Well, you start thinking about like, well, first of all, if you're constructing a portfolio, we think about like, well, what games do we want to build that sort of complement each other, that move us along that sort of vertical axis, right? And how do we build a portfolio out of those? But just generally thinking about like, what are the sort of component parts of a game being successful, right? And so we go back to building out this matrix, and you could fill this matrix in by hand, right? You could just say, okay, well, I think that this is a mass appeal game and it trends men, right? You could do that by hand. But that's subjective, tedious, and not very scientific, right? So, there's some other problems with this. We've got recency bias. So like, we will likely only place games that are popular now or in recent past on that chart, but really we're looking for games with long lifetimes, right? And we're also very likely to focus on one point in time. When in reality, we want to see the app's trend and downloaded grossing charts, right? So the viability means the ability to reinvest in the marketing. So if we look at it today, right, well, that's where it's at today, but where did it grow from over time? Like, and so that's why doing this is subject to all these kind of cognitive biases seeping in. Like there's the recency bias, and then there's the survivorship bias. What we actually want to see is like, well, if there's a game that's lower in the charts but it's moving up, that's actually a really good signal that could be a successful game. It's just that it's not successful now. We want to kind of look at the trajectory more than we want to look at the current state, right? And also, like some of these games, it's just the state that they're in right now doesn't appeal to you because you're a small developer trying to become a big developer, right? You want to know what these games did when they were small developers to be successful, not what they look like now, because you can't replicate that because you're not that, right? And so this kind of approach where we take this set of quadrants and we just sort of like fill it in based on intuition, that's not a really good approach to thinking about how do we build our game to be successful, right? That we launch now and grows into being successful versus some of these games are many years old, right? And that's where we get into rapid prototyping. So I think there's two formats that rapid prototyping can take. One is just quick publishing an MVP to make decisions on early retention data. So you make a very basic version of your game. It's got maybe the core loop is in place, but not much else. And you push it out and you say, look, it's got to hit day one retention of 30%. And if it doesn't, then we're killing it. And if it does, then we'll keep developing it, right? Or maybe that's 40% or 50% for a hyper casual game. And the other is to click test creatives to fake app stores or to just other apps, maybe in your portfolio, in order to get a sense of funnel conversion. So here we're not even really looking at the sort of in-app performance, the in-game performance. We're just looking at our ability to promote this, to get people to click on it, right? So these are not mutually exclusive. A lot of times people use these kind of in combination, right? You'll do both. You'll start with click testing creatives, and you'll progress into the quick publishing MVP, and you'll develop the MVP, and it'll progress and progress and progress, and then you'll green light it. But the idea here is that if we go back to this idea of like filling out this matrix, this is just based on gut intuition. That's not going to be very scientific. We don't know what these games did at launch to become the successes they are today. We're just sort of backfilling this based on these two sort of cognitive biases. What we really want to do is we want to test something right now. We want to see what will the market support right now? How can we get something into people's hands and see if they click on it, A, and then they just play it, and engage with it, B, and does the sort of state of the market now support building this game or not? Now we could go based on intuition and we could look at what the market looks like now and what games are successful now, but we don't know what those games did when they were just launched or how they went through soft launch, right? It's better to get real data from real users than it is to sort of backfill a kind of matrix like that and get a sense for what successful games now look like across all these different demographic dimensions. And so this is kind of, a standard, I guess, like call it a template for doing this rapid proto testing. So you start with this fake app store click test, right? And what that means is, there's these products, you can find, a number of them on just Google for fake app store. I won't promote them specifically now. And there's a couple of them, but you basically, you create ads, you put budget into the ads, and the ads actually lead to a website that looks just like the App Store, right? And so people think they're on the App Store, and then they click install, and then what you do is you collect all the click through data, and you collect the number of times that they click that install button, kind of mapping that to what would have been an install, and you can get different metrics, right? So you can get a click through rate, you can get an IPM, and you can even get a CPI, right? Because you get the costs associated with that, and you can use that data, that set of data, to determine like, hey, is this game viable? Does this game have any potential, right? And maybe you set some sort of standard for IPM, and you say, okay, if the IPM is at least this high, then we'll move forward into development. But if it's not, then we won't, right? And the fake app store click test, what you're doing is you're testing the power triad of resonance. You're looking at, okay, let's take a mechanic, let's take a theme, and let's take a tone, and then let's map that onto a fake ad creative. Let's make a fake ad, right, for this game, and let's see if people will click on it, right? And if they won't, then let's go back to the drawing board in terms of that combination of mechanic and tone and theme. And if they will, and the IPM or the CTR or the CPI is at whatever standard you want it to be, then let's move into development, right? And then you get to an MVP release. And what this is, the arrow kind of pointing back to it, it's just that this is a cycle, right? This is like an iterative cycle, and you keep sort of adding more content to the MVP and tuning it and polishing it. And then you set these gates. Maybe it's every release, maybe it's every 2 weeks, every month, or whatever, where you say, look, if the MVP doesn't hit this DX retention, DX could be day 1, day 7, whatever. If it doesn't hit at least this value, then we'll kill it. And if it does, then we'll keep developing, right? And so what you're doing here is you're validating in this process, you're validating the game concept through the mechanic times the theme times the tone. And that sort of passing whatever that standard is means you initiate development of the game. And then the development of the MVP progresses in iterative waves based on performance gates. And the game is either greenlit to the next development phase or not at each one of those gates. And then the global launch is contingent on hitting engagement targets, right? So maybe finally we say we're not going to release a game until we see that D30 is 20%, right? Or 15% or whatever. And so it's just a matter of getting from that day 1 to that day 30 through these iterative release cycles. And then determining, each time, do we want to greenlight this to the next sort of development cycle or not? Do we want to kill it and save our time? And then, going back to save our time and save our money, right? Because the earlier you kill it on this arrow, the more money you save and the more sort of opportunity costs you save. So what are some resources for developing ideas / concepts? I think a good one is the Facebook ads library. It's free. So you can go and you can see what games are popular, and you do that through just the top charts. And then you say, okay, what types of ad creative are they using? And so what are they doing to sort of promote that? And how can we take that data and sort of parse it and use it as feedback in the design of our game or the planning of our game, right? In the determination of what we actually want to build. And the next is Sensor Tower. I think, my sense is that, and I kind of say this privately a lot, but like being really good at Sensor Tower is a competitive advantage. And when I say good, is I mean you can navigate it quickly and you can sort of ingest all the data. You know where to look for things. Being really good at Sensor Tower is a competitive advantage, right? Being able to survey the market very quickly, understanding what's working, what's not, that's a competitive advantage, right? And so using Sensor Tower to figure out what combinations of theme / tone / mechanics are successfully ascending the downloaded / grossing ranks, right? So those are tools. Those are resources for developing ideas / concepts. And then, all of this progresses, the development of the MVP and the rapid prototyping, it progresses based on some sort of model of DAU / revenue. So ARPDAU, et cetera, right? So gate 1 is like the earliest MVP. And you're looking at maybe, this is just, this is an example, but day 1 retention, right? We want day 1 retention of at least 40% or we kill. And then gate 2 is day 3 retention. So we need day 3 retention of at least, 30% or 20% or whatever. And then we go to gate 3, which is day 7 or 14 or day 30 or whatever. And then finally you get to a green light that depends on the genre / modeled goals, right? So we've got a model, right? We've got a model of here's what click-through rate is. Here's what IPM is. Here's what CPI is, right? Here's what day one retention is, here's day two, day three, day four, whatever. We've got this model, and we can sort of forecast how much money we're going to make, because we can kind of get we have an estimate of, like, let's say we're a hyper casual game, so we have an estimate of what our CPMs will be for our ads, and we know how we kind of have an estimate based on our click tests of how much we'll pay to get a user. And then we have all this retention data that'll give us a sense of what our DAU looks like, and we kind of know sessions per day just based on observing people using the game. And based on all that data that we aggregate, we can build a model, and it can be simple. It could be in Excel, right? Or maybe it's this more complex Python model. But the idea is we can build a model, right? And there's actual sort of data that we can use to inform our decision of, like, should we kill this or not? Because based on our forecast, based on our model, our retention is not high enough to produce the DAU that we need, right? Based on the CPM that we're getting to actually support UA, and so that we won't be able to grow this game, right? Based on the model that we have and all the data that we've collected, this game is non-viable, right? We're just not able to produce a high enough level of DAU because retention is not good enough, right? And at least then you're making a decision that's based on assumptions, but those assumptions are informed by data, right? And so that's a scientific approach. That's a systematic approach to growing your game, right? And tools like Theseus, that's why I built this, is to help people do these kind of DAU / revenue projections. So thank you very much. That's my presentation. You can find me on Twitter at Eric_Seufert. You can also email me at eric@mobiledevmemo.com. My ambition was to get this recorded in 30 minutes, and I think I did that. I think I had to talk kind of fast in order to do that, but I hope you enjoyed the presentation. I hope you could understand everything I was saying, even though I was talking very fast. Thank you very much, and thank you to the Homa team for having me today.